2 years before The Matrix, a movie came out in Italy where a video game character becomes aware of himself and begs his creator to delete him. The late 90s. The internet is just appearing, computers are noisy, and the words virtual reality sound like magic. And at that very moment, a movie comes out in Italy that unexpectedly mixes ideas from Blade Runner, eXistenZ, and The Matrix itself. This is Nirvana, a strange and dark cyberpunk film starring Christopher Lambert. Few people remember the film, but it could have been the zero version of The Matrix. This is Cine Underground series. Let's figure out why the film was forgotten and whether it was bringing it back from the digital oblivion. Nirvana takes us to a classic cyberpunk future: endless rain, neon lights, the damp smell of city trash, and science in very language of the world. In general, as often happens in future movies, everything feels uncomfortable and gloomy. It feels like the city is made from scraps of old sci-fi and abandoned industrial sites. Corporations rule everything, and people talk more with programs than with other people. Jimmy, played by Christopher Lambert, is a video game developer. His new game gets infected by a virus, and one of the characters, named Solo, suddenly becomes self-aware. He realizes he is living in an endless loop of the same events, which he is not happy about, and he asks his creator to erase him forever. To do this, Jimmy has to go on a journey through a world where the virtual and the real have mixed together. Along the way, he meets underground hackers, forgotten factory districts, and old love, and people trying to survive in a system that doesn't care about them. The story seems simple, but the idea is really cool. A program that becomes self-aware asks for freedom through its own destruction. If in The Matrix a human rebels against the simulation, here the simulation asks the human to let it go. Visually, the film looks a bit like Blade Runner, only without the Hollywood shine. It's a cyberpunk made from scrap, rusty pipes, peeling walls, cables sliding down the sides of buildings. And all of it was filmed not in Tokyo or Los Angeles, but at an industrial district of Milan. Italian cyberpunk. It sounds strange, but it looks surprisingly solid. Gabriele Salvatores before Nirvana was a respected Italian director. His Mediterranean won an Oscar, and he made films about friendship, nostalgia, and human warmth. And then, a few years later, a sharp turn: simulation, viruses, digital despair. For Italy in the mid-90s, this seemed unexpected. Salvatore suddenly created a philosophical dystopia where the characters talk about freedom of mind and death in virtual reality. And this is not an attempt to copy Hollywood. Nirvana is cyberpunk filtered through Italian melancholy. Christopher Lambert was invited to play the role of the Italian Rick Deckard, who raised Jim Dini, the video game developer. At that time his career had just started to slow down a bit. By then he was already a recognizable face thanks to Highlander and Luc Besson's Subway. It's also worth remembering Mortal Kombat, where he played Lord Raiden, but it seems that role didn't help Lambert's career much either. By the late 90s, he was somewhere between a steady past and a B-movie present. His Jimmy is not a hero, but a tired programmer who doesn't save the world. He just wants to turn off the game. This is a character that goes against all Hollywood logic, where the hero always has to win. The whole film actually feels the fatigue of the characters. Jimmy is tired of a life without love. Solo, a game character, is tired of repeating the same actions. Both men are going through a kind of midlife crisis. They have entered a stage of reevaluating their values, realizing they are unhappy with their lives and doubting the decisions they make. The film's title is not accidental. Besides the obvious reference to Kurt Cobain, there is also a more literal meaning. In Buddhism, Nirvana is not heaven, but disappearance. The disappearance of pain, desires, and attachments. The film literally says, sometimes to be free, you need to delete yourself. For Solo, it is an act of freedom. For Jimmy, it is an act of compassion. In Nirvana, two extremes are surprisingly combined. The Buddhist idea of rebirth and European cyberpunk decadence. The city rots under the rain and people hide behind screens. At the center of the story is the question: what does it mean to be alive if you are created inside a program? At one point, Solo says to his creator, "If you delete me, I will finally be free." It's not a fight for life and free will like in The Matrix, but a desire to end the endless repetition. But there is also a connection to the Wachowski trilogy. Both Solo and Neo are not just fighting for freedom, both are fighting against the system in the same way. In both cases, it is a metaphor for the fighting against any system of oppression. It doesn't matter if they are political, social, or even mental. Now let's talk about a small trend in 19th cinema. A person is tired of reality, he wants to escape. into games, dreams, alternate worlds, virtual cities. Of course, technological progress played a big role in this. The internet was reaching more people, computers were getting more powerful, and video games were becoming more advanced. And here it's important to understand one thing, without which Nirvana doesn't make sense at all. What people were actually afraid of computers back then. Technological progress also had a dark side. The dot-com bubble was already starting to inflate, and the famous Y2K problem was approaching. This, also called the year 2000 bug, worried many people at the time. Many old computers and programs recorded the year with just 2 digits, for example 98 instead of 1998. This saved memory back when it was very small and expensive. When the year 2000 was about to come, such systems saw 00, and so it was 1900, not a new century. Because of this, time calculations, payments, schedules, inventory, basically anything that depended on the date could break. Of course, not real collapse happened, so there were a few small glitches, so nothing special happened, but beforehand, things like that seemed much more frightening. And where things are unclear, they feel scary, and fear is a great fuel for art. That's why films about technology and virtual realities became especially popular. In 1995 the following films came out: Hackers with Angelina Jolie and Johnny Lee Miller, Johnny Mnemonic with Keanu Reeves, The Net with Sandra Bullock, the cult classic Ghost in the Shell. In 1997 Nirvana, Gattaca, Conspiracy Theory. In 1999 eXistenZ by David Cronenberg, The Matrix, The 13th Floor, Fight Club. As you can see, this is not a complete list, and I've even included some films that aren't entirely about technology, but also films that simply reflect the era's distrust of corporations, like Fight Club or, for example, the film Cube as a fear of bureaucracy. Nirvana doesn't try to give the audience a big concept like The Matrix. It doesn't make philosophical manifestos like Ghost in the Shell. It doesn't build a mystery like Dark City. In the film, the virus doesn't destroy, on the contrary, it frees. It helps the character break out of the endless cycle. The virus is not evil, but a tool for rebooting. For its time, this was a fairly fresh idea. Salvatores focuses not on control and rebellion, like in American films, but on fatigue and the desire for peace. The director deliberately avoided glossy futurism. He wanted to create a world that is not imagined but lived, not the future but post-present. This is also reflected in the visual style. The film used minimal CGI, so the world looks natural, even if futuristic. Of course, there were budget limits, which also led to avoiding extensive use of computer graphics, but all of this fits the idea of creating a city that looks worn out, rusty, and even alien to its own inhabitants. Cyberpunk is not just about advanced technology, but also its excess. The main character's apartment looks just as uncomfortable. This was actually a popular design for future apartments. Natural materials are already scarce, if they exist at all, and even fairly wealthy people can't use them. And Jimmy is exactly that kind of person. And the fact that much of the film was shot at the former Alfa Romeo factory in Milan even adds a touch of irony. The result is visual styles that is actually closer not to The Matrix, but to early music videos by The Prodigy and Aphex Twin, with a feeling of dirt, anxiety, and half dreamlike techno madness. Salvatores show us the decadence of the future, exactly the result that came from what was happening in the 90s. Corporations are taking over the world and technology serves power. Nirvana was shown at the Cannes Film Festival out of competition. At the same time, Luc Besson's The Fifth Element was there. Both at the festival and afterward, the film received a wide range of reactions, from too serious and overloaded to a rich and fascinated techno-fantasy. And now critics and viewers debate how Nirvana has stood the test of time. And as always, opinions differ. Some think the film didn't become a classic, while others call it derivative. But many include it in list of main cyberpunk films and important movies about virtual reality and the metaverse. Nirvana became a logical, so somewhat unexpected film, both for the director's career and for Italian cinema, which is not very famous for science fiction. Salvatore stepped away from his usual Italian-style comedy, but kept the key themes of his work: friendship, escape, and the search of awareness. I have plenty of criticism of the film. Many scenes feel confusing, and sometimes it's honestly hard to understand what's happening. Looking back now, the film doesn't really surprise anymore, but you can't miss how much it influenced cyberpunk and techno thrillers, despite all its flaws. A strong point of the film, not the very strongest but rather unexpected, was the humor. There isn't much of it in Nirvana, but there are funny moments mostly coming from Solo, the video game character. I haven't mentioned yet that he was played by the well-known Italian actor Diogo Abadantuono, who had worked with Salvatores before, including on the Oscar-winning Mediterraneo. Nirvana is a strange, uneven but honest cyberpunk. It stands apart in the lineup of dark techno-thrillers of the 90s. It's a film about a man who created a world and a program that wanted to be alive. About freedom, not through victory, but through deletion. The film may feel a bit outdated, but that only makes it more interesting as a time artifact. Write your suggestions for Cine Underground films in the comments. This was Max Chkonia, see you in the next videos. Bye everyone!